Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is while you're watching this. And although I do bike reviews after I've owned them and ridden them for about 10,000 miles in a year, I thought I'd do a quick one on the Himalayan and the Tracer, putting them head to head and awarding marks for various features, and we'll see which one ends up on top. Starting with the tyres, the Himalayan has the semi-knobbly type by a company called, I'm not sure how to pronounce this, Keat? Not sure. They were actually an Italian company originally, bought out and shipped to India, and they seem to make all the Enfield tyres from what I've seen. The Bridgestone T32s that equip the Tracer are also good tyres, and to be honest, I can't find much to choose between the two of them. Each of them work on the bike they're fitted to, but the Tracer ones look like they're going to last longer, so 2 points to the Tracer tyres, 1 for the Himalayan. Next up on the brakes, the Vibri ones that are fitted on the Himalayan, single-sided calipers, and Vibri is actually by Brembo, so they're going to be a good make. They're just not their top-end brakes. People have said they're wooden. I find they're perfectly good for the bike. You certainly get feedback through them, and I've got no problems with them. Yes, they're not massively powerful, but they do work very well with this bike, and you only get one disc up front. In contrast, the Tracer has got a pair of opposed piston calipers for all the braking goodies you need, something that will do north of 130 miles an hour. If you're on a track or somewhere where you're allowed to do that, you need to stop quick. These are certainly going to stop you quicker. But remember, if the ABS has come in, the brakes are working as hard as they can. It's down to the tyres then. So another point each. Now we start getting on to some niggly stuff. Look at the length of that mudguard on the Himalayan. Coupled with a Cooperb aftermarket bash plate, it certainly does keep the muck off. And really good original equipment that. It doesn't meet the current fashion for short mudguards, but then again, I don't find it very fashionable to be scrubbing my bike every time I go out on it. In contrast, the Tracer has the lambda sensor right at the front of the exhaust, and you can see the end of the red bit is the end of the original exhaust, and the big extension that I've put on it is a Pyramid Plastics one, and this is unwashed from when I'd ridden it, and you can see how much muck is kept off by the Pyramid Plastic one. It doesn't look pretty, but it does the job, and I'd much rather spend less time cleaning and worrying about the state of the lambda sensor than how the bike looks at the front, which I can't see when I'm riding it. So on that one, the Himalayan wins out on the original equipment. Coming on to lights. Himalayan LED running lights, then obviously starting the engine like you do on all modern bikes to get the headlight on. And yeah, it's a bit dim. You can see here in the video, you can actually see the reflector profile. So I had to go and buy some extra lights from Givey. I've not tested them in the dark yet. Cooper fitted them on a service because I pulled the wiring loom out and thought, stuff that, put it all back in the box. It really didn't look like something I'd be happy having a stab at myself and trying to find where to hide all the bits of wiring. Indicators are nice and big and bright, just what you want on a bike. And obviously their main beam slightly brighter, but at night the original headlight is pretty awful. Comes to the Tracer, ignition on, you get your couple of fancy LED daytime running lights. You'll prod of the starter to get the main lights on, and they're underslung. Yeah, it's not a typical headlight, it's two different lights that you've got here, both of them LED, both bright. And yeah, they do work at night. The only thing is that they don't turn with the handlebars, so slow speed cornering you don't get quite as much out the side. The indicators look a bit wimpy. They look very, very small, and I've had a few people say they are small, but when you look at them for real, they do have more orange running down the strip than just the small lights that you see here. So the video is a little bit on the deceptive side. So Tracer scores another point. Himalayan doesn't at all on this one because the lights are so poor on the originals. You can't fit brighter or more powerful bulbs because that will burn the lens of it, so you do need the extra lights. Moving on to the screen, the original screen on the Himalayan, great. Keeps the wind off. It's really strange. It's a very strange shape. You think it's going to batter you to death, but it does keep quite a lot of the wind off. And yep, little Cooperb sticker on the front of it where I bought it from. The Tracer, less good. You'll see that this is not the original Tracer screen. The original one battered my head at anything above 55 to 60 miles an hour, no matter if I had it in the high or the low setting, and above 65 on dual carriageways it was starting to pull my visor open, which is a bit worrying. It shows that the wind blast is getting round the side of me. I'm 5'10", and it was really, really uncomfortable. Didn't like it at all. I saw one of these Puig screens on another tracer. Thought it looked very neat, and it does put all the wind blast across your shoulders and face, so it spreads the wind blast out. I'm used to riding naked bikes. I think it's great. It's a nice little addition. I wouldn't ride without a screen on these. The clocks are notorious that if you jet wash them they fill up full of water and pack up, so a little bit of protection when you're riding into rain as well. And of course it let me put a little mascot on, a little beaker, because I've called the tracer Beaker for obvious reasons, and that's pretty much the same look I had when I hit the deer a couple of weeks ago. That's another point for the Himalayan there, for the screen being better than the tracers. Moving on to the clocks, start off with the Himalayan ones, nice traditional ones. I do like analogue clocks, not digital ones. And here we go, everything's starting to wake up now. The fuel gauge is typical bike fuel gauge. It will say full when it's full, it will say empty when it's empty. Anything in between, it's somewhere there. I use a trip meter. There's a little multifunction display at the bottom of the Speedo. The tacho's a little bit smaller. I prefer them to be the same size, but I can live with this. The tripper I don't like. I don't use it. I did try it once. You turn the bike off, turn it back on, and it doesn't actually find the route again like a sat-nav does. Also, if you're using one of these, you are relying on getting a phone signal. Next to the fuel gauge is a gear indicator. It used to be a compass. I wish it still was. Apparently they were quite entertaining in the fact they would indicate there was a magnetic field, but they weren't terribly good at keeping true north. But then again, my work phone, it's got mapping function on it, and within 2 days of it being reset, if I'm trying to use it, it'll tell me I'm walking at 90 degrees to the direction I am and need recalibrating. So yeah, not terribly good. There's 3 buttons on here, an adjust, a mode and an ABS disengage that works on the rear only. They do take quite a lot of pushing. They're a bit of a hard push, these ones. You get 2 trip meters with an average speed on them as well, which is a bit of an interesting one that I've never seen before on a bike. And obviously when you run low fuel, you start getting the low fuel one as well, the Trip F. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to press the mode button and have a look at this. There you go. See that? The mode button changes it from Fahrenheit to Celsius and back again. These instruments are incredibly bright. They're far brighter than they need to be for riding at night, and with the poor headlight as well, they do make it very difficult riding at night. Also, the Speedo needle is very difficult to see at night as well. I think they'd have been better off with a solid orange needle on that rather than this semi-transparent one. When you look at the tracer, it looks like the mothership's landed when you turn it on. All sorts of lights are going off, and you've got a dual TFT display. A lot of people don't like these. I think it looks like Johnny 5 from Short Circuit. You can change the modes, and the little thumb wheel lets you do loads of other things. You can control the heated grips from it. You've got 4 displays on the right hand side, which you can change to whatever you like. So you can scroll through. I keep them on 2 trips, and the average fuel consumption, and of course a temperature gauge. Always useful on a water-cooled bike to know what the temperature is in case you get problems with it, like the cooling fan like I did on my Gladius. Fuel gauge on this one as well is a bit unusual. There's 4 bars on it. The first bar, going from the right hand side to the middle, is half a tank, and that'll probably last you 130 miles or so. Then the second bar will drop in about 20, the third bar will drop about 40 miles after that. So it's a bit like the Himalayan one or a mid-80s one. It tells you when it's full, it tells you when it's empty. Anything else, use a trip meter and reset it every time you fill up. So scores are drawing even now at 5 points each. Looking onto the switch gear, this is the Himalayans. There is an extra switch here between the main switch cluster and the sat-nav, which is for the spotlights. And on here you've got a trigger you can't see at the front for the high beam flash, high and low beam, indicators and horn. Moving across to the other side, we have the hazards, the kill switch and the start button. Nice and simple. And the tracer looks like the space shuttle. There's a lot of pushes on here. The pass button isn't on the trigger on the front. That's a mode switch. So it works on the dipped beam one, and it's a bit easy to actually flick it all the way onto what you think is going to be dipped and giving a quick flash of the lights. The indicator, I find it sometimes I catch my thumb against where the cruise control is. It's just a case of getting used to it. Moving across to the right hand, we have a fully ride-by-wire throttle, and I do like these integrated start switches, kill switches. I do quite like those. The menu is a bit fiddly to push the button in, but the scrolling's easy enough. And one thing I did have to do was replace the clutch lever. It's far too far out for me. I've got size 9 hands. Riding in winter gloves or even autumn spring gloves where they were a bit more padded, I was very fingertip trying to feather the clutch rather than having it further in. So I bought one of these aftermarket clutch levers. I haven't done anything with the brake lever, don't need to, so they are odd, one red and one silver. So for the equipment on the handlebars, Himalayan wins out again because it's simple. I don't really like all the extra switches. I don't use the cruise control. The mode control is set on 1 most of the time. If it's really cold and wet, I'll set it on 2 or 3. Setting it in 4 makes it feel like the Gladius that I traded in for this bike. The tracer doesn't get a point here because I did have to change the clutch lever as well. Moving on to the mirrors, these are the original Enfield mirrors shown at the bottom, and the second look one, I think they're called, I can never get that name right, shown at the top. You can see that the Enfield one is a very fisheye type convex lens and on the front of it, and I just couldn't really adjust my head to it, so I bought the flatter one with the bike. But it's interesting, when you put the original one in front of the second look one, then yeah, it's in exactly the right position, and you don't see your shoulders in it, apart from on the very edge where you would see in any proper mirror. So yeah, you don't need the aftermarket ones, but I prefer them. Looking at the tracer, looks like a nice long mirror, but I did have to extend it. These are 20mm aluminium extensions, one on each side, because they're not that good. And come on, bike manufacturers, put mirrors on these things that you can actually see behind you. If somebody wants a fashionable one that's smaller, let them buy it themselves rather than have to buy extensions to make the original mirrors work. So again, the tracer doesn't get any points because the original mirrors didn't have as much view as I'd like. The Himalayan does score because the original mirrors do give you a good view behind. It's just that my old head won't adjust to the mirrors and swapping between bikes. Looking at the engines, Royal Enfield 411cc single cylinder, overhead cam, overhead valve engine, about as simple as you can get in a 4-stroke. A massive 24 horsepower, I think they're out of these, and about 24 foot-pounds of torque. And it sits there, plods along, and if you're not sitting on a motorway trying to keep up to 70 miles an hour, it's very, very good on the fuel. Nice looking engine. Black, I'd rather it be silver, but hey, it comes in black, so I've got a black one. Tracer CP3 engine, nearly 900cc triple, puts out a phenomenal amount of horsepower for the size of the engine, and it's not quite as flexible as a triple that I'd had before in a speed triple engine. You do need to use the brakes now and again, and it doesn't feel quite the same on the torque. But it's a good strong engine so far. The clutch cover's got a plastic cover over the top of it. Reason for that is that you tend to put your leg down there when you put your leg out, and if it was a metal clutch cover, you'd stand the risk of scorching the inside of your textiles or leathers. So both good engines. The Himalayan gets 2 points here because the engine is good for what it's designed for. The Tracer gets 3 because the engine is good low speed handling or low revs handling, and once you open it up, it certainly tries to pull your arms out when you're accelerating. Moving on to the tanks, the Himalayan's a bit weird. It's got a 14 litre tank, but when you're trying to fill it up, because it's a spine frame, there's almost no space between the underside of the fuel cap and the top of the tank, or at the bottom of the tank. So you do have to get creative for the angle that you hold the petrol pump at to get a good fill in one of these. And interestingly, the manual says the last litre isn't usable because of the shape of the tank. If you've ever managed to run out of petrol, you can still hear it sloshing about in the bottom, but you can't actually get to it because of where the fuel pump is or the fuel tap is. By contrast, the Tracer carries 6 more litres of fuel, big wide fuel tank set very high on the bike, you can see from these clips here, and it does make the bike feel more top heavy than the Himalayan, although they're about the same weight. So yep, there's a point each for them. The tanks do what they're designed to for the bike. Now we move on to the tank frame that's only fitted to the Himalayan. You can strap a couple of bags to these. When it comes to the Tracer, you can't even get them as an option on the 2020 bikes. To be honest, there's no way you could realistically bolt them to without a massive frame redesign or them sticking out further than the handlebars. So half a point for the Himalayan because they are useful and it looks like they're going to protect the tank in the event of a bit of a dink. Moving on to the seat, they're both very comfortable. Getting the Himalayan one off is one key in the side and both bits come off together, both parts of the seat. You'll see here there's a hole in the rider seat and that fits directly over the seat latch. On the pillion seat there's a little lug that sticks out and that engages to lock the seat. So although you've got a two-piece seat, it is quite easy to get off, and obviously I've taken the cool cover off the front one for this video. Tracer by contrast, similar principle, put the key in, turn it, pillion seat pad comes off, and then you have to remove a rubber bung like so. And you can see here it's got a hole in it, a little fork on the end, and then you have to shove your finger in and wiggle it about and try and find the seat catch. Obviously I've not had this long enough, so I've not taken the seat off too many times. And there you go, access to the battery, fuses and everything else, same as you get on the Himalayan. But it's a lot more fiddly, and there's this double latch mechanism, and if you feel under here without the rubber bung, almost no resistance. So I think the bung is designed to stop the latch releasing. They may have had a problem on the Mark 1 or another bike with this latch actually releasing in use. So putting it back on, as Haynes would say, is the opposite of disassembly. Trying to get this rubber bung in is an absolute pain in the neck. I've not had it long enough to get the technique down pat. I'm just trying here, you can see. Then I thought, I've got a bright idea. I'll lift the seat up and put it under, then put the seat back down. Trouble is, it actually blocks the mechanism from working, which it's designed to do, so you can't do that. So what I've started doing is sort of putting the seat about halfway in, putting the rubber in, then getting everything down and dusted and secured. But it's a bit fiddly. There must be a better design they could have come up with than this. I know the Mark II Tracers had this one as well, the ones before this, but reinstalling the pillion seat is just quite a simple latching. Although the seats are comfortable, I'm going to give it an extra half mark to the Himalayan for the lack of faffness compared to the Tracer. Looking at the back end, here we go round the inside of the Himalayan, and muck gets everywhere, and under that little R&G shock sock, or whatever they call it, is the rear shock, and you can see the tide mark where it gets protected by the swing arm, but the rest of it does get filthy. So I installed one of these. It's a nightmare to get these blimming things in. Might be easier to get somebody to do it on a service, just when it's up somewhere on a work stand or something like that, but I had a bit of a fight laying on the floor to get this one on. Tracer's the same. I've installed an aftermarket pyramid plastics hugger on this, and it does keep the body of the shock clean. You can see I've been out for a ride, but the linkages are getting coated, so they're going to be a service item. And you can see at the bottom of the picture, even the pyramid plastics one, it's got a water trap in it. I would have thought they would have engineered that out in the moulding, but there you go, it might be required for the shape of the moulding or something. They need to have that in so they can actually make a one-piece plastic moulding. As I'm basing this on the original equipment for the bikes, neither of them get a mark for this because the original chain guard stroke huggers on both of them let so much muck onto the rear shock, not where you want it. Looking at the luggage that you can get as an option on the Himalayan, you can get these nice silver ammo case style ones. They will stack on top of each other, and if you give them a bit of a wobble when they're empty, they don't tend to fall down much more than that, and they will do. The fittings are a little bit faffy. The two black blocks on the bottom go on the lower luggage rail, then you turn the catches on the top from the inside and screw them in. It's a big nut and a lock nut, so there we go. Put the big hand nut round, while holding the bar at the back, then just give the lock nut a quick twiddle and it holds it on. Top shuts nicely, nice big metal latch on it. The thing is though, the keys do seem to be one size fits every pannier, and when you put an E45 top box on, you can't open the lid. You can ease it round the pannier, but it does feel like it's straining the hinges a little. The other thing is, you don't get carrying handles on these, so I tend to leave them strapped to the bike anyway, but they do have these little lugs on the top that you could rig something up onto. Tracer side case, they're a very odd fashionable shape, and when they're empty, a slight knock and over it goes. You don't want it laying on here, it's the latching mechanism, and I'd rather these things could actually stand up and better still be stacked and easier to put into the garage. I've got quite a packed garage, and luggage that isn't a convenient shape is a pain in the neck. The top box, it will stand up on its back, it will lay down again on its mechanism, which I don't like leaving them laying on, and it's got a really funky face on the back of it, quite cute. So here we are, we've got the side case on, meant to be able to take a full face crash helmet, so I'll try an old AGV flip up, which is my test piece these days. It's retired, it's quite long in the tooth, and although it sort of fits in, you can't close the lid. I'm trying all ways to fit this helmet in, trying to get a bit creative. Yeah, it's got that funny lump at the front of the pannier for the pillion leg to get round, but if you made the back of the pannier straight rather than angled, and a little bit, half an inch or so out the front of it, you'd get a helmet in there. A solid might go in, a flip up certainly won't. I'm 5'10", and this is looking in the top box. When it's on the centre stand, the top box does sit very high. It's bright red like the rest of the bike. The key is the same as the ignition key. Got a carrying handle on it as well. The side cases also have carrying handles, so you can just put your keys in and carry it with the keys in place. Overall marks then. For the luggage, I've awarded the Himalayan 1 mark, the Tracer 1 mark. If the Tracer side cases carried a helmet or were top opening, which is more convenient than side opening, I find on side cases, there'd be definitely more marks there. And there we are. The Himalayan wins by a couple of points so far on my 3,000 mile quick review. So which one would I own? Two bikes that are of the same style but vastly different. And if it comes to it, and I could only have one of these, it wouldn't be the Himalayan. Not because it's a bad bike, it got more marks here, as you can see. That it's a far less expensive vehicle to own. You can buy one for half the price of a Tracer, but I do a lot of miles. If I was commuting to and from work, my current commute is about 15 miles each way, I use the Himalayan a lot for that when I'm in the office as opposed to being out on site somewhere. And I really enjoy it, it's a really good ride, but I do a lot of miles. I do a lot of miles on motorways, on fast A roads, on dual carriageways. That's where the Himalayan struggles, the Tracer doesn't. I would also take the Himalayan places where I wouldn't take the Tracer, such as some fairly dodgy roads up in the Peak District that I was out exploring. I wouldn't have fancied being on the Tracer there, but the Himalayan lapped it up. Horses for courses, I do like both of them. I want to keep both of them. If it came down to one or the other, it would be the Tracer, but it is quite a squeaky choice as to which one more suits me. You may find one or the other suits you. If you like going quicker, you'd want the Tracer. If you like having a lot of fun on a bike that is less expensive and you can buy a lot of equipment for and still come well under the price of a Tracer, then have a look at the Himalayan. It's a cracking bike. I love mine. So thanks for watching. And I'm working on the CB500 review, and there's going to be loads of other stuff as well, and I hope to see you again soon.